This is a comment I get a lot whenever I talk about how important it is for Canadian politicians to understand French. And yeah, the comment is totally right. It's unrealistic to expect total proficiency of every Canadian politician, which is why most Quebecois and most French-speaking Canadians don't. I mean, for starters, because even total French proficiency sounds very different depending on where you might be living in Canada. French, as it's spoken in Canada, is almost twice as old as English, and it largely developed in smaller communities before things like railroads or mass media allowed for a standardization of the language. So even native-level French proficiency is going to sound very different if it's from a Franco-Manitoban than if it's from an Acadian, for example. And even within Quebec, we have a lot of different local accents and even variations in vocabulary. So a totally proficient native French speaker from Montreal who's, say, 15 is going to sound very different from a 75-year-old native French speaker from, say, La Beauce. Even keen-eared Quebecois listeners of my French language videos will usually be able to tell I'm from the Quebec City region by the way I say things like La Beauce. So our flexibility on what counts as proficiency is pretty wide even within ourselves. Also, most of us who speak English, and in Quebec that's about half of us, do so with varying levels of proficiency that don't prevent us from being able to communicate anyway. So if we don't expect that we need to be totally proficient in English to speak to you, we also don't expect you to be totally proficient in French to speak to us. All we really need is to be reasonably confident that a Canadian politician will understand what we're saying when we're speaking to them, and will also understand what they're saying when they're speaking to us. And in Canada, that's a fairly broad spectrum, much more so than it is in English. Obviously, I'm sure people will mention in the comments how they've had some negative experiences with people using unrealistic standards of French to make fun of them for trying to speak. To them, let me just say, I'm sorry, there are millions of us. By the law of large numbers, there are going to be some idiots and some jerks among us too. But that is very far from the mainstream sentiment, and we don't like them either.